Greetings to the participants of this important venue on the 6th of April. We are not commemorating NATO, which is a criminal entity. And in fact, what we should underscore is the fact that there is no alliance, because all command structures are in the hands of the Pentagon. Livorno, Camp Darby. Camp Darby was established in 1951, barely 2 years after the signing of the Washington Treaty, which led, of course, to the instatement of this alliance, so-called alliance. It was never an alliance. Camp Darby today is considered to be a community. The features of the military base are not revealed. The agreement established in 1951 between the Italian government and the Pentagon is something which has not even been revealed to the public. Now, what I think is very important, if we go back in history, there was never a liberation of Italy in the wake of World War II. What was established was occupation. The military bases established in the Axis countries, namely Germany and Italy, were the first step towards occupation. The second step towards occupation was 1949 and thereafter, whereby the United States established military bases in a large number of NATO member countries. In other words, what we should realize is that Europe, Western Europe, and subsequently Eastern Europe were, in a sense, colonized. It's when you have military bases on your territory, you don't control your politics. So that there were several interrelated objectives in NATO's establishment. One, of course, was to secure a military base in Western Europe directed against the Soviet Union with a view to undermining the relationship between East-West, which was unfolding both in terms of trade, culture, and so on, which has its historic roots. The second, of course, was to control the internal politics of Western European countries. In other words, to have influence on the politics of these countries, and of course also to prevent the unfolding of any kind of progressive alternative to global capitalism. So I think that's the second. The third has to do with the colonies of several of the Western European countries, which were ultimately taken over by the United States. I'm thinking of France, but also Italy. These colonies in North Africa and elsewhere were ultimately absorbed by the US empire, and consequently the former colonial powers have more or less been wiped off the map. And of course, another related objective of NATO and its establishment in Western Europe was to have a platform which would then be used to attack the Middle East, and of course in 1999 to attack Yugoslavia. And the various bases, which were particularly in Italy, were used by the United States. There was never any joint command. You might read that there's joint command between Italy and the United States, but in fact, the command structure is that of the Pentagon. Now, one important element of the deployment of military facilities in Western Europe is that the United States has established, allegedly with the countries concerned under national command, military facilities which now store and deploy tactical nuclear weapons. And these tactical nuclear weapons are stored and deployed allegedly under national command, but taking orders from the Pentagon. In other words, the Western countries do the dirty work for the Pentagon in Belgium, Holland, Italy, Germany, and Turkey. 5 so-called non-nuclear states which deploy tactical nuclear weapons essentially against the Middle East, but also against the Russian Federation. And this matter has never been the object of any kind of news coverage. We focus on North Korea and its nuclear capabilities, but we don't look at Turkey or Italy, which have stored in their vaults and deployed nuclear weapons to be delivered through various means, and which are far more significant than those deployed by North Korea. So these 5 countries are de facto nuclear weapons states, taking orders from the Pentagon. Another dimension is that Germany, in fact, is not only deploying these tactical nuclear weapons made in America. They're called the B-61, and now we're going to a more advanced bomb, which is the B-61-12. They are, in fact, producing strategic nuclear weapons for the deployment by their partner, France, through the integration of, through joint ventures. It's the EADS, it was the integration of Deutsche Aerospace with Aerospatiale Matra. So that in effect, Germany is a nuclear weapons state. It produces weapons on the one hand, which it sells to France under joint venture. And secondly, it has nuclear weapons made in America under its command, so-called under its national command. But again, the NATO structure is such that the member countries, the 29 member countries, with exception of the United States, of course, exercise very little in terms of authority. Now, let us look at the broader picture of deployment of the deployment of military bases throughout the world. And this is something which emerged after World War II, and we call that the post-war era. But there was no post-war era. What there was a geographic deployment of US military facilities, bases throughout the world. We call that essentially, these are the geographic commands. And we have something of the order of 800 US military bases in about 80 countries. Now those military bases are negotiated with local governments. Theoretically, they're there to protect these countries against foreign intrusion, but in fact, they establish a system of de facto military occupation to the effect that we have a system of alliances, both the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is called the Atlantic Alliance, but there is no alliance. What there is an imposition of US-led militarization in sovereign countries, which inevitably undermines the identity of those countries and their ability to exercise their sovereignty. So this is broadly the situation which we are facing. And this is why we have to implement what we might describe as NATO exit. NATO exit means that individually, countries, starting with Italy, but extending throughout the European Union and beyond, we will exit NATO. Not exactly in the same way as Theresa May wants Britain to exit the European Union, but let's call this NATO exit.